Hey guys, welcome to the IB Economist. So in today's video, we're going to tell you how you can get a 7 in your micro commentary. We're going to go over a general formula that you can apply to your commentary and somewhat of an exemplar. Reminder that this video will go over a type of commentary we suggest you do, but it is definitely not the only micro topic you can do to get a 7. So before you even start your commentary, you need to keep one thing in mind. Don't overcomplicate it. You only have 750 words to write a commentary, so if you pick a super complicated article, you're going to overwhelm yourself and end up with an overly cluttered product. Of course, you want a level of complexity that hits all the requirements, but going too complex is unnecessary. IB marks you on accuracy, detail, and depth, not necessarily on how much of the syllabus you can stuff into 750 words. To get a good mark, we suggest you stick to a simple 2-graph market failure situation and do a really good job analyzing it. Alright, now let's move on to the actual commentary. The first thing you need to do when writing a commentary is to pick an article. Like I said before, we highly suggest that you pick an article on market failure. Negative externalities in consumption is always the best choice. An article on that is super easy to find. Just go on Google or a news site and search up tax on alcohol, or tobacco, or sugar beverages even. There's always a government somewhere that's taxing tobacco. Tax on a demerit good is super easy to evaluate and will get you a good mark if you do it well. In this video, we'll go over a sample commentary that did tax on a sugar beverage. If your article is different, you can still follow the format, but you'll need to tweak it a little bit. Okay, so now you have your article and you've highlighted all the important parts. You need to sum up the article in one sentence, as short as possible. For example, Toronto just imposed a new indirect tax on sugar beverages. Simple. This should be the very first sentence of your commentary. Now after that, you want to establish the good as a demerit good. Sugar beverages lead to obesity, tobacco leads to lung cancer and air pollution, whatever you need to say. Again, 1 or 2 sentences should be enough for this. So now you can move on to describe the initial situation. By this, I mean what the market would be like before the tax. By the way, this is also where your first graph will be. So for us, this will be a market failure with negative externalities and consumption graph accompanied with explanations. If you don't know how to do that, go back to your notes. MSC is equal to MPC, MSB is below MPB, QP, where you are producing at, is not at QOPT, the optimal amount of output from society's point of view, and there's actual welfare loss. Make sure you don't do anything stupid like label the graph wrong, and make sure that the actual welfare loss is clearly labeled. Remember with the graph, you want to explain the whole graph. Here are some points you have to hit in this section. So for definitions, you want to define a demerit good, or a merit good if that's what your article is talking about. You want to define negative externalities. You also want to define marginal social benefits, marginal private benefits, marginal social costs, and marginal private costs. Remember that you want to define marginal social benefits, not MSB. MSB is a label of your curve. There's a fine distinction there. You also want to define actual welfare loss and social welfare, if you ever use those terms in your explanation. If not, it's not a must. Here are also a couple of statements you want to hit in the explanation. So you want to outline the relationship between MSB and MPB. Is it higher or is it lower? And also you want to define the value of the negative externalities, which you want to say is equal to the distance between MSB and MPB. You also want to outline the situation at QP. What's higher than what? You also want to state that there is an over-provision of demerit goods and output needs to decrease in order to maximize social welfare. Now after getting the basic situation down, you want to get into the change that happens in your article. In our case, it's the tax. Whatever the change is, define it. Define what an indirect tax is. Then draw a graph illustrating the effects of the tax, how it will shift the curve. So MPC shifts inwards to MPC2, eliminating the negative externality. For details on that, go to the micro video. We're just going to list a couple of key points here. First of all, supply goes down. Second of all, the amount of tax equals to the value of the negative externality. Third of all, quantity down, price up. Because we want to cover as many units as possible, you want to add something about elasticity here. So a demerit good is often addictive, and thus the price is inelastic in demand. You also want to illustrate this in the graph. This point will come back a bit later. Now you've got the second graph down, you want to evaluate the situation. So winners and losers. We have three major parties here: consumers, producers, and the government. Consumers lose because they pay more for the same good, and they pay more of the tax burden because it's inelastic. Producers lose because their revenue decreases. However, they pay less of a tax burden than consumers. The government wins because they get tax revenue. When explaining this, you want to continuously refer to the boxes in the graph, so clear labeling is very important. Feel free to color code if you need to. Make sure the teacher can understand what you're talking about here. After discussing how the tax would work and the winners and losers, it's time to talk about why this solution wouldn't work. When it comes to taxation, there are three major points. First of all, it's difficult to quantify the value of the negative externality. Thus, it's very difficult to determine the right amount of tax. Second of all, the tax may be unsuccessful due to the price inelastic demand. This is when you bring the elasticity factor back in and you can do analysis on that. Third of all, parallel markets may be birthed and people will still buy it anyway somewhere else. So there are obviously many more reasons, so feel free to swap out these based on your article. Just make sure that your argument does make sense. Right after discussing how the tax is bad, you want to suggest an alternative. Honestly, this part is optional, but it's something nice to have. Suggest a ban or education as like an alternative solution to the market failure. It doesn't have to be long. You don't even necessarily need to evaluate the alternative. Just have a statement that's saying, hey, this might be a better solution. So now, finally, the conclusion. Not much to say here, it's just one sentence to tell your final stance. Remember that you do have to take a stand in the end, so tell the teacher whether you think the tax is good or bad, and with that, why. So now hand your commentary to somebody else to edit and make sure you didn't make any stupid mistakes. And now you are done your micro commentary. Thank you so much for watching. We are the IB Economists. Please check out our other videos.